Hello and good afternoon, and welcome everybody to the Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity keynote session. I'm Steve Jamieson. I'm the Chief Executive here at the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists. As we all know, equality, diversity and inclusion is a central theme of the RCSLT vision, along with commitment to embedding anti-racism and an explicit recognition of the role of SLTs in tackling health inequalities. With this in mind, we have asked representatives from our EDI working groups to contribute to this keynote session. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Katie Chads, Sinlika Stewart, and Nazir Rizwan, who are members of the RCSLT Anti-Racism Reference Group. We've also got Jodie Simpson, Polly Davis, and Mary Lavender, who are part of the RCSLT Disability and Neurodiversity groups, and Kate Boot and Jessica Davis, who are all on the RCSLT LGBTQIA+ group. I would rather allow these wonderful individuals to provide more insight into their experiences and work. So without further ado, I will hand over to the first group, which is our anti-racism representatives. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So I'm Nazir Rizwan, and I've been involved with anti-racism work both within the RCSLT and within where I work within my NHS trust, and with wider EDI issues as well. So for me, this is something that I'm very passionate about, because I think ultimately when we think about what makes us happy and content, regardless of whether it's in the workplace or outside of work, when you're thinking about life well-being in general, one of the things is around having a strong sense of belonging and shared belonging. And I'm going to touch on that for the main part of my brief talk. And I think the main reason is because if you are somebody that comes from a minority background, you are acutely aware of the differences between you and the majority around you. And there is often this feeling of having to work twice as hard to try to fit in, but whilst also trying to maintain your own authenticity. And so having to juggle that takes a lot of mental and emotional effort, and it can take a toll on you. And if you're someone who's part of the majority demographic, then that's something you may not have even considered, what it's feel like not to belong. And this might be the first time you've even considered the fact that it is possible to be around lots of people and still feel like the odd one out, to feel as though you are being othered. So I'll share a story. So when I was an NQP many years ago, I remember having amazing supervision support, shadowing opportunities, and I had great feedback. So all sounds great, right, from an NQP point of view. Yet there was something that just didn't sit right with me, and I just wasn't sure what it was. And it did make me doubt myself a little bit around, what's going on? Everything seems to be right on paper, yet why do I feel this sense of difference? And it was a good few months into my NQP role when a new NQP joined, which is great. I wasn't the new person anymore. This new NQP was someone who did look like most of the other people in the team. So she was female, she was white, she pretty much looked like most of my colleagues. And within about 1 or 2 weeks of her joining, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, there was a conversation in the office around following on from chats that had happened during a social get-together the night before. And the NQP asked me, oh, why weren't you there? And I said, oh, because I wasn't invited, followed by an awkward silence. So I think what had happened was that people had made their own assumptions about me, whether I would want to go, whether I should be invited or not, based, I don't know why. Maybe what I look like, maybe my name, maybe where they think, how they thought I grew up, or what my beliefs may or may not be. But they made those assumptions without even asking me. And it was at that moment that I came to realize that no matter how well I was performing at my job, I will probably find it quite difficult to feel like I truly belonged within that team. So if you are someone that's from the majority background, it is important for you to take active steps to help foster a sense of belonging with your colleagues that come from all different walks of life. Can you share a slide, please? So what can you do as an ally to actively support your colleagues? So before taking any action, there's a few questions that would be helpful for you to consider. So do you have the appetite and desire to ask questions and affect change? Are you ready to ask questions of yourself and others? Do you accept and acknowledge that this is a problem? So just because you may not have seen something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Are you prepared to apologize earnestly? Do you challenge assumptions and ask those that are impacted? And do you take demonstrative action? So thank you for listening, and I will hand over to Sandika now.
Thanks very much, Nazia. Thank you for that. So hello, everyone. I am Sandika Sterle. I am an independent speech and language therapist across West Sussex and Surrey. And if you look at the picture that I've chosen, I've deliberately chosen the picture that's on the screen because anti-racism is something that we should all discuss, but it's not something that we all discuss. So coming up with new ideas to discuss an old topic, engaging some blue sky thinking is part of why I am here today. I'm also here because George Floyd was brutally killed in 2020. So many of you may know that the resulting call to action by RCSLT members was answered by RCSLT by creating an anti-racism reference group. I joined the group because I grew up in South Africa during the apartheid regime. I experienced legal segregation and open racism for the formative years of my life. George Floyd's death awoke a personal journey for me of dealing with colonialism, oppression, and racism. Suddenly, when RCSLT formed the anti-racism group, things we were not allowed to talk about in public became okay, and I grabbed the opportunity to discuss with colleagues professionally. So when Vicky Baker, who's one of the RCSLT trustees and the clinical director in West Sussex, asked for volunteers to pilot a study and deliver 2 anti-racism workshops on my home turf, again, I grabbed the opportunity. I wanted to see change and I wanted to be part of that change starting in my home turf. The anti-racism talks were attended by 105 AHPs on 2 separate half-day talks. Less than 1% of the people that attended were people of color, and the majority were white females. Next slide, please. So the common thread that ran through our workshops was asking everyone to consider anti-racism on 3 levels: the individual level, the team level, and the organizational level. We acknowledged that we didn't have all the answers, and we still don't have all the answers, but that getting the answers begins with asking questions, as Nazia said, as part of her allyship. So today I'd like you to think through some starter questions at each level. So first we'll start with the individual level. Next slide, please. Firstly, how often do I check my white privilege? Do I check it at all? Do I become aware of it when a colleague mentions something like a microaggression? Am I aware of it at all during meetings? And do I build it into my daily planning? Have I actively looked into opportunities to understand active anti-racism? There's a lot of actives in that sentence because that's what we require from you all now, some call to action. Next slide, please. Next, we go on to the teams level. Within your teams, has the topic of active anti-racism come up on the meeting agenda? If not, why not? And who needs to put it there? Do you have an anti-racism champion in your team? Someone who keeps you questioning and thinking around this topic? And finally, have you updated your resources to include people of color? Are you aware of the updated standardized tests, books, and content creators out there who are putting in the work to make representative resources for all? Next slide, please. We now move on to the organizational level, because what we know is that for things to work on the anti-racism front, we need to have a bottom-up and a top-down approach that meets in the middle, which is where the team comes in. So on the organizational level, has your organization committed to be actively anti-racist through visible leadership? Is there willingness to change long-term through a commitment from the top? has your organization got a clear written stance and set of values regarding active anti-racism? And a really important next point, how big is the gap between policy and what really, really happens in the workplace? And finally, what accountability systems are currently in place, and are you aware of them? So next slide, please. I'm going to stop with the questions there and leave those questions for you to either mull over or to bring up at your next team meetings, or maybe even write into your organizations and ask some of these questions. And just thinking about the teamwork, because what we know and what we found in West Sussex is that by delivering this training through a teams approach, it supported the collective responsibility, it kept the conversation going, and it kept the change happening. Thanks very much, everyone. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Rizwana, next.
When she was describing some of her lived experience and I was comparing it to my own, I was kind of really saddened that everything that she was describing was still happening or had happened to my generation. And having been in the game for quite some time now, I was thinking about the next generation coming through, and I thought, you know, this cycle is repeating itself. And it just got me thinking. And it got me thinking about my journey towards a more inclusive leadership style, because I was quite fortunate in the beginning of my career. I seemed to fast track quite quickly into senior leadership. So within 5 years, I was appointed as a Band 8A. And I thought that was fantastic. And similar to what has been said earlier, you know, that kind of feedback, you know, you take it really positively and you think, oh no, there's no discrimination, there's nothing going on. But then when you start to notice that you've sort of peaked too soon, and that glass ceiling becomes ever so more apparent to you. And then when you're looking and comparing yourself with other peers and things, and you notice things, you actually do feel the exclusion that is, in effect, the outcome of the discrimination. And so then I got thinking about, well, instinctively, you'd think I'd want to be involved in anti-racism because that's the core of the things that have affected me. But actually, there's intersectionality, and most people don't just fit into one protected characteristic if their reason for discrimination is protected in the first place. And so I wanted to then sort of think about what can I do to not be a part of the problem, and what can I do about it? And there was a quote from Mother Teresa that just got me thinking. It was, I cannot change the world alone, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples. And I kind of liked that, because we do that anyway in our jobs as speech and language therapists. We're often advocating for patients and things. And I thought, why are we not doing that for each other? So as my leadership journey continued, I then sort of wanted to focus more on inclusive leadership. And what is inclusive leadership? It's about showing compassion. So I studied a lot of the Michael West work, and then I looked at a lot of other things. And because of my own experiences not being encouraged or supported to grow, I sort of took a more self-directed learning approach. And that had its positives and negatives, because the positives were, it meant I was in control of the courses that I went on, and I dictated what I wanted to learn. It also meant I chose courses that weren't your typical courses that people go on for management and leadership and things like that. So I had a bit more of a holistic approach. I started to collaborate more with other disciplines, because I found that my profession was harder to sort of break those barriers with, so then that made me a much more natural collaborator with other professions and things. And then I started to incorporate that. And then I took on this fellowship with Legacy HE, which is now part of NHS England. And it was an EDI role. And it was an absolute fantastic opportunity for me to go through some sort of cathartic experience of everything that had happened to me and make sense of it. And how can I turn that around into a positive? And so amongst several different types of work programs that I had there, the most favorite one was I was given the opportunity to implement some or design some masterclasses in EDI. And I thought, well, I don't want this to be just another EDI training program. What do I want to achieve? So I thought, actually, my goal would be to create a network of allies. And so because I was based in the Northwest, that was my target population. So I thought I want to appeal to people who are in chief positions, lead positions, faculty and everything, just to make sure I can cover. And I don't want it to be just allyship for anti-racism. I want it to be allyship across the board, because any kind of discrimination, whether you have a protected characteristic or not, is exclusion, isn't it? So that was my rationale for it. Then I thought, I want to create a program that I would want to go on, because I like to go on things that are slightly different, much more variety in how you learn and everything, appeal to different learning styles, create a psychological safe space, carry that duration so that there's time for people to reflect, have those curious conversations and implement the things that they're thinking about and talking about, learning about. So I looked into virtual reality and incorporating that into there. We spent a lot of time on social construct theory and unpicking that and thought, and the discrimination that comes through, and systemic discrimination, and how it then trickles down into the populations that we serve, as well as looking after our workforce. And it created a really fantastic network that's created this opportunity for people to look at allyship through a different lens, choose whichever area that they have the most connection to, and so I think that's what I wanted to bring to this working group, was something a little bit different in that respect, but also how, because I think we're very creative as AHPs, and especially as speech and language therapists, we're very resourceful, and so yeah, so I think that's pretty much my motivation, and I hope some of that resonated with some of you out there as well. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks so much, Rizwana. I'm just going to introduce a project very briefly, but I just wanted to extend my thanks for the invitation to speak in this session. I'm under no illusion that, you know, I'm here with my whiteness, sitting on an anti-racism session, and I recognise the privilege that brings to me, and that's furthered by the opportunity to speak on this platform. But the phenomenon I want to kind of focus on in this part today is, indeed, as a person with privilege, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable and talking about learning and unlearning. And so I hope this could resonate with some of you. So I'm going to talk just briefly about a piece of work that I've been involved in with a huge group of collaborators. And I want to reiterate that actually the reflective and co-produced nature of this project that has brought the biggest learning for me. And I hope that through what we deliver through this project, this can be replicated to some extent for others. And this is the Art for SLT project. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as I mentioned, there's been a lot of people contribute to this and drive it forward, and I'm so very, very thankful for them, and this short talk is really wholly to their credit. Especially I'd like to give a special mention to all of the SLTs, many of who are on this panel already today, for kind of speaking up about the injustices and the racism in the profession that they've experienced over the years, and whose voices have really shaped both my personal relationship to racism and anti-racism, as well as countless others, and indeed shaped my relationship with this particular project. So secondly, I also just wanted to give a big thank you to the colleagues who've been particularly committed to seeing this project through, and I'm delighted that Sanlika and Rizwana, who I've been working with, you've also had the opportunity to hear from today. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the art project that I'm involved in aims to evaluate the feasibility, acceptability and indicative effectiveness of a new educational programme or training that's particularly for speech and language therapists and is based on racism and being actively anti-racist. If you could go to the next slide. So there are three main stages to the project. So we happen to design the intervention, we're then going to implement it and evaluate it. And we've spent most of the time up till now, and rightly so, on this design element. So we've been using principles of co-production, and personally, as I sort of alluded to earlier, this has been the biggest learning curve, because what I've been able to do through this process is have so many opportunities to speak with others, reflect on and adjust my own perspective, and again continually reevaluate what I understand about my own privilege. And I really valued being in that position to have that experience. If you could go to the next slide, please. Sorry, and the next slide. So the co-production of the training has been at multiple levels. So we've worked closely with members of the RCSLT anti-racism reference group who have shaped what the project should be, how it should look and what it should aim to do. So kind of really trying to fit with the priorities of that group. We also have a small working group that have been more specifically involved in getting the training together, who've sort of helped shape the design of the piece of research and also bring in the resources already used and trialled in training sessions. So, for example, some of the work that Sanlika has been doing with Vicky Baker, and also some of the work that Rizwan has been doing as well. Finally, I'm delighted to be working with these very two experienced sort of trainers or educators who have been central in refining the package, and particularly I've really valued their input on designing kind of a well-being and emotional support element to accompany the training. And indeed, they will hopefully deliver it as well. If I could have the next slide, please. So the resulting sort of training package that we've designed so far is suitable for teams. We're hopefully going to pilot this soon. It's very diverse and interactive. It contains specific goals for each sessions. It's got lots of video materials, and these include those from the RCSLT members that developed them a couple of years ago, also some content from the University of Essex's Dare to Care website. There are lots of reflective activities, and there's also theory-based content, and as I said, some of those kind of psychological safeguards. Next slide, please. So the next phase will hopefully begin shortly, which we'll be able to roll the training out on a small scale so that we can test the feasibility and evaluate it. And eventually we hope to modify it based on some of that feedback, improve it, and sort of the long-term goal would be to create a version that can be used more widely and more widely rolled out. So if you go to the next slide, that's just a thank you so much for your time today. And if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to discuss any of it via email. And thank you so much once again to the other speakers, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much, Katie, and to everyone for their presentations. Really powerful. And I just want to, from a personal perspective and as Chief Exec of RCSLT, just thank you all for the work that you're doing in this really important area. And you have my reassurance that we will continue to support the development of all of this work moving forward. Moving swiftly on now to the next group, which is the Disability and Neurodiversity group. And I'm ready to hand over to you.
Hi, everyone. We are the representative of the Disability and Neurodiversity Working Group, and we will be talking to you today about disability and neurodiversity in the speech and language therapy workforce.
A speech and language therapist based up in the north in West Yorkshire. I'm also the co-founder of the UK's first peer support network for neurodivergent speech and language therapists. I am a white woman with short red and blue hair. You can't see the blue, but with glasses, and I'm wearing a burgundy sweater.
Hi, everyone. My name is Polly Davis, and my pronouns are they, them, or she, her. And I am currently a speech and language therapist working in the Northwest for Outcomes First group. I am a white woman in my late 20s. I have blonde hair with streaks of purple, and I am wearing a blue jumper. And the reason we're doing these audio descriptions is to make this presentation as accessible as possible for people who may have visual impairments.
Hi, I'm Mary Lavender. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman with blonde hair, and currently I'm wearing a butterfly top. I'm a highly specialised speech and language therapist in a mental health and learning disability trust in the Northeast. I also chair our disabled staff network in the trust, which is funded as they see the importance of these roles. It is the three of us presenting here today. However, we want to acknowledge the many amazing SLTs and students who have contributed to this work, and also what many of them are doing in their own areas. It is a joint venture. It is not just the three of us who are asking for this call to action. Next slide. So, Lewis Capaldi's Glastonbury set displayed the best of the human spirit and put disability centre stage. If only for an hour, his disability is visible. The crowd loved him. If only society was always so accepting of difference. As if the crowd was saying, we want you exactly as you. So for the next 15 minutes, we are putting disability centre stage and asking you that you will accept us for our authentic selves. We know that some people might not identify with being disabled. However, it is an umbrella term which is used in the Equality Act. Some people here today might not know you are protected under the Equality Act, and we encourage you to find out more. Next slide. So ableism. What is ableism? Ableism is the discrimination of and social prejudice against disabled people based on the belief that typical abilities are superior. Ableism is rooted in the assumption that disabled people require fixing. It classifies people as less than. And we feel ableism is such an important topic to discuss. I understand it might be uncomfortable. However, to create a more inclusive workforce and society, we need to be open to this topic. Many of us have shared in our groups how we have experienced ableism on a regular basis. These are hard stories to hear. To note, just because we are disabled doesn't mean we are not ableist. We have all been brought up in an ableist society, so sometimes it can be difficult to recognise. Ableism, though, is affecting our workforce. I will read one quote from someone in the group, which highlights some of the obvious ableist attitudes towards disabled people. At an interview for my SLT course, I was asked, how do you think you'll manage a full-time course with your disability? And are you sure you can cope with a master's? And you can't expect us to find all accessible placements. We feel this is not acceptable. I haven't got the time to talk about internalized ableism, but this is also crucial for us all to understand. Next slide, please. With these figures, we can't say for definite any of these stats are accurate, but we feel it's important to refer to them. So why is the topic of disability important? Currently, 24% of the UK population are classed as disabled. 22% of our SLT population identify as being disabled, which is something to celebrate, as it means we are becoming a profession which is reflecting the communities we serve. In 2021 and HCPC, it was only 7% of SLTs were identified as disabled, but we do understand that many choose not to share their disabilities for a variety of reasons. We also want you to make you aware of the large disability employment gap. Currently, it is thought only 52% of disabled people are in employment and only 21.7% of autistic people in employment. Next slide, please. So we know there are many strengths of having disabled SLTs in the workforce, to have many types of disabilities. However, this is not always valued. We do have some myths to bust in our profession. Disabled talent is a word that is currently used globally. Sometimes as individuals, we find it hard to recognize our own unique strengths because of the way society has viewed disability, but it is an important part of our journey. These words on the slide are from a group exercise individuals were asked to ask about their own strengths. I do talk a lot about disabled talent. However, our question to you all today is, why do we have to keep on proving our worth?
So it's very important, as Mary's mentioned, to celebrate the strengths of disabled speech and language therapists and what we bring to our profession. However, it's also important that we discuss the barriers that we face. These barriers are not the fault nor the responsibility of the disabled individual, but must instead be considered and addressed in the context of a social model of disability. It's also important to think that these barriers may vary between individuals, and we must think about intersectionality when we consider the barriers that individuals face. Broadly speaking, these barriers can be grouped into the 6 types seen here. We have attitudinal barriers. These may include negative views from others and fear of prejudice or discrimination upon disclosure. This may also involve assumptions or stereotypes made about disabled people, because some speech therapists may assume that they know a condition well, having worked with it, and that this supersedes lived experience. We also face physical barriers. These can include challenges accessing certain environments, certain equipment and resources, buildings, or challenges completing certain tasks due to physical needs. We also experience policy barriers. People with disabilities are often asked, what do you need in terms of reasonable adjustments, but we may not always know ourselves. And in the same way, managers may not always know. Organisations may claim to be disability or neurodiversity affirming, but lack tangible support policies for their own employees. We may also see policies that are explicitly discriminatory. For example, sickness and absence policies may discriminate against people with chronic and long-term illnesses. We also face communication barriers. Communication barriers are something that all speech and language therapists should be familiar with. We often find that neurodivergent speech and language therapists or those with communication differences face communication breakdowns with colleagues. Our own communication styles may not always be understood or accepted by others, which can lead to experience of microaggression. We also may face social barriers. This can include difficulties forming relationships with colleagues or being explicitly excluded from social events or conversations within the office. People may also be refused work because they are considered a poor culture fit for an organisation, as opposed to due to their actual skill set. And generally, we also face a lack of representation of disabled speech and language therapists. And finally, we may face environmental barriers. These can include sensory or physical difficulties accessing certain environments or completing certain tasks, as well as the difficulty adjusting to changing expectations or inconsistent workloads. These barriers can have huge consequences, both to disabled speech and language therapists and to the wider profession. They can affect recruitment, job satisfaction, and workforce retention. In a poll completed in the neurodiversity support group with neurodivergent SLTs and students, 88% of neurodivergent SLTs had considered leaving the profession altogether due to the discrimination that they faced, and 93% of students reported that they had considered leaving their courses. At a time when we have a massive employment gap in the profession, it's absolutely shocking to hear that disabled speech and language therapists feel like we're being driven out. So why is this? Disabled speech and language therapists report facing negative experiences within the workplace. These can include discrimination and unconscious bias, which refers to the potentially unconscious ways that managers and colleagues may treat disabled speech and language therapists differently. For example, by overlooking us for promotions, micromanaging caseloads, or minimising the difficulties that an individual faces. A common experience might be being told that you don't seem autistic or you don't seem disabled, and therefore why are you asking for these adjustments? We also have a lack of support for reasonable adjustments. Even when reasonable adjustments have been sought through things like access to work or occupational health, they are not always understood or met by employers, especially when related to the hidden aspects of disability. Adjustments like reducing the number of contacts, using adaptive technology, working flexibly, or accessing a private space to complete administrative tasks are often seen as unreasonable or unimportant by managers, or are referred to as special treatment by colleagues. We also face issues with workforce retention, as we've previously discussed. Not only do qualified SLTs consider leaving their roles due to discrimination and prejudice, but students also report significant difficulty accessing support and passing placements or exams. Institutions can sometimes question a student's competency based on their needs, instead of looking at how simple adjustments can help them to achieve their potential and complete courses. We also face a recruitment process bias. Throughout the recruitment process, disabled SLTs find all kinds of challenges. This can include the use of ableist language in job adverts. For example, referencing excellent concentration and working memory skills may exclude those with executive functioning difficulties. Adjustments are often not offered or even considered at interviews, and many people don't know that they can ask for adjustments at interviews. The interview process itself can also feel incredibly difficult or anxiety-provoking for people with some disabilities, for example, social communication differences, because interviews explicitly assess social communication, verbal reasoning skills, and working memory, as opposed to assessing your actual competence to complete your speech and language therapy role.
So we have achieved so much in the short time that we've been working together as a disability working group. We have 3 sets of guidelines in place and a couple that are going to be coming out in the spring, which we're really excited about. We've given quite a bit of accessibility advice to various different groups that have asked for it. We now have the National Peer Support Group for Neurodivergent Speech and Language Therapists, and we have around 230 members that have now joined that, which is absolutely fantastic. A lot of people have said, I thought I was the only autistic person in the speech and language therapy profession, so it's brilliant that people are feeling like they belong. I don't even have time to tell you about the rest of the things that we've got going on, but we can tell you some of these in the lunchtime group that we've set up, and we've also put a few links on the neurodiversity and disability page in the group chat. One thing I do want to add though is that all of this has been achieved by disabled and neurodivergent therapists and students whilst managing chronic pain, frequent burnout, mental health conditions, as well as the executive functioning challenges that come along with neurodivergence. And that makes this an even bigger achievement. So winning the Giving Voice Award the other week felt really, really validating to be recognised. Next slide. It has been absolutely wonderful being part of the peer support group this year. It has completely passed our expectations of what we were hoping for it. And I am so proud of watching everybody grow this year, and even myself too. I've learned so much about myself. There is a growing body of research around the value of peer support, and especially around the benefits to mental health. And as a marginalised group, it is really important that we have this support and this sense of belonging. Developing pride in our identity and having the confidence to disclose is important. We've spent a lot of time in the group talking about our strengths and reframing the narratives that we have about ourselves. Getting a diagnosis often means looking at our lives through a model of deficits and challenges. It's really traumatic, and it takes us a really long time to even recognise our own self-worth, especially when people keep making assumptions about our skills based on outdated models of neurodivergence and disability. Group members are reporting relief in being heard and understood, and we seem to have a strong sense of belonging in the group. We've also been sharing lots of information about reasonable adjustments and how people can start asking for adjustments that they need, and they have a much better idea of the things that they can actually ask for and things that will be helpful. It has been absolutely fantastic hearing people's stories and positive experiences of having adjustments in interviews, for example. Often they didn't even realise they can ask for them, and now everybody's just asking for it routinely. Next slide. So there's lots of things that you can do to be an ally for us, and we really, really need you to be allies because we can't do this on our own. Taking responsibility for reflecting on your own unconscious bias. This is probably one of the biggest causes of workplace discrimination and microaggressions. For example, over-focusing or harsher scrutiny on the difficulties compared to our peers, pathologizing an autistic person's theory of mind just because they've shared an alternative perspective, not inviting somebody to a team social because you've made an assumption that they wouldn't want to come because of their social anxiety. Challenge assumptions that you have about disability and neurodivergence by updating your outdated medical research understanding and stereotypes. We've included a few things on the last couple of pages that you can use to start with your learning journey. Be a champion and include disabled and neurodivergent voices and focus on co-production and value lived experiences. Learn more about disability, neurodiversity, and as Maz has already said, about ableism. Help us to reframe the narratives about disability and neurodivergence. It's not just enough to read about it. We need you to make changes as well. We have spent far too long trying to do this on our own, and we need the help to thrive. Challenge microaggressions, prejudice, and discriminations when you see it. Too many people are standing by and watching us be treated unfairly. We end up leaving the profession, or we end up having a mental health crisis. It's called quiet firing. Nurture psychologically safe environments and learn together. We all need this because people are far too anxious about making mistakes. So they avoid having these conversations altogether, or they're very defensive about them. We all need to be open, honest, and curious to be able to move forward. And lastly, build allyship, advocacy, and promote accessibility and inclusion both inside and outside of the workplace. Thank you very much for listening today. You can join us in the lunchtime drop-in, and you can leave your comments and we'll try and answer them as best we can. Next few slides just give you some references and a few things that you can start learning. Thank you.
Jodie, thank you so much for that really powerful presentation, and all of those references will be up on our website for quite a while so people can access those. So thank you so much, really powerful. I'm going to move on now to our final group. Our group is the LGBTQIA+ group, and I'm going to hand over to you now. Welcome.
Oh my God.
keynote talk today. Thank you to the groups that have gone before us and the people scheduling the programme to acknowledge the need for this. Kate and I, as two white cisgendered LGBTQ+ women, are aware that we are today speaking on behalf of both the UK SLT Pride Network and the working group, who, you know, we're representing many more people today. That's people of colour, that's people with disabilities, that's people of different genders. So we're just two people representing our work today. And we can't speak for everybody's experience across all the intersections because we haven't experienced them ourselves. I'm Jess. I'm a cisgendered, white, able-bodied female. I am a speech and language therapist working with acute adult populations in South London.
And I'm Kate Boots. I'm a cisgendered, autistic, ADHD, white speech and language therapist, working in an employed role for Outcomes First Group as a clinical lead and also in independent practice.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So who are we? Kate and I are representing the UK SLT Pride Network today. We have been working with Royal College to collaborate with our LGBTQIA+ working group, and we will talk about the working group and our work with that in a moment, but we would like to start by explaining what our Pride Network is, how it formed, who we are, and what we do as well. So we formed in a nature which your parents probably told you not to do. We all met online in 2021 when we were in and out of lockdowns in those lovely days of the pandemic. One of our co-chairs, Kate Mordy, you can see some of their tweets on screen. They actually kicked this all off just by actually sharing a bit of their personality and their own story, and it got really great connectivity from lots of us on Twitter that I think we probably all wanted to meet similar people and find a space, and it wasn't there beforehand. So through that we recognised there was a lack of connection and a lack of representation, or we were all that one person in our team or in our trust. And we were maybe hiding aspects of ourselves, trying to fit in with the norm and just get by and mask at work perhaps. We weren't bringing our whole selves to work. So collectively we engaged, we started a group of a messaging group, and then formalized things a bit more when we realized the need was there. So we've had some events since forming over 2 years ago now. Our events have included virtual talks from Dr. Sean Pert, talking about his experiences as an out gay male speech and language therapist. We've had talks from Simon Bordeaux and Lizzie Jenner about their experiences with their different intersections as well. And we've had different socials that have virtually crossed the whole of the UK, and we've had people tuning in from Singapore and New Zealand, I believe, and we've also had some in-person meetups as well, which has been really fantastic. We have a regular newsletter with network updates and relevant activities that people can get involved with, and we share that to our network members, along with invitations to our socials and events. And essentially we've established what we believe is a safe space on a Discord server. It's a protected space on the internet where we can network either professionally or socially with other LGBTQIA+ members of the profession for professional and personal support. Our ongoing aims at the moment for the network are to expand student engagement and our outreach partnerships with universities around the country and the Giving Voice societies. and we're hoping to provide LGBTQIA+ affirming training and guidance for SLTs and students alike. And some of this is through our work with the working group, which we'll explain in a moment. Next slide, please. Some of the events that we've been very lucky to take part in and help organise have been 2 Pride marches. These are the first ones that the RCSLT have attended in the UK, so we're very proud to have made that happen with Royal College. We attended the 50th Pride March in London, and then again this summer we were in Leeds with Royal College as well. Next slide, please. And some more events that we've had, we look at social events as well as some more informative talks that we've had, including Instagram takeovers, Twitter takeovers with the Giving Voice channel, and we have collaborated with SLT Time on a podcast episode as well. I'm sure you can find that on your podcast channels, wherever you might find them. As you can see below on all of our slides, if you are interested in following us or finding out any more information, that's where all of our handles are. And we're always looking to collaborate with other groups as well. As you can see, we would love to do socials and events about any and all issues that affect people in our community, because, you know, we are not one thing. We represent a combination of all the different elements in our lives, and we bring that all to our work. So we're going to transition on now and look at how we set up our work with the working group and how we've established our relationships with the Royal College. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Jess. So yeah, we've worked really hard as a network to try and increase the opportunities for LGBTQ+ members of the profession, students included, academic professionals, clinicians. And about a year ago now, we had been talking in committee meetings about various pieces of work that were happening with RCSLT, and particularly thinking about the EDI work. And we talked about it in terms of, if you visualised sort of these 3 aspects of EDI as pillars, that there was work happening with the anti-racism piece and the disability piece, and we felt like we could play a role in increasing and building that pillar for LGBTQ+, not least because as we've already touched on, Jess and I are just 2 of 10 committee members, but between that committee we are a massively intersectional group of people. And so we pitched some ideas to the Royal College about making guidance and resources for the profession, and from that a working group was born. We have over 80 members of that working group, and we engage with them in a variety of ways, both directly and asynchronously, for people to engage in non-direct sort of communication ways. We've had lots of meetings and have started to do some really important pieces of work, and we're really pleased that today we're able to shine a light on some of those initial pieces of work that we are signing off and launching today and in the very near future. Next slide, please. So one of the immediate activities that we wanted to sort of push forward was to develop some audit tools for the profession. So we've thought very much about there being a individual audit tool, but also something that can be used by a team or at a service level by commissioners. So echoing some of the themes that Senalika mentioned earlier about anti-racism, having tools that are available for people who might be doing individual work, but also thinking about what that might look like team and organisationally, because there needs to be all of that in place for LGBTQ+ affirming spaces to be created. So we are really pleased that we are going to shortly have some self and team audit tools that will be available. Next slide, please. And to support with that, we are also very shortly going to be launching some guidance, and again taking inspiration from the guidance that's coming from has come out from the disability working group. We wanted to think about that intersectionality piece, think about information that people who don't have our experiences, who can't speak to those experiences, might therefore not know about certain things that are important to LGBTQ plus people. And so we have worked closely with the working group and some external stakeholders to develop some guidance that will give people up-to-date information about how they can look at good practice, why things matter, what's the importance of training, thinking about intersectionality, in order to be able to complement those audit tools and to developing LGBTQ plus affirming spaces. But perhaps the most exciting piece that we are really excited is launching as of today. So please keep an eye out on RCSLT, LinkedIn, and it's already been put up on X, is what we have on our next slide. So we have developed, along with the working group and again some external stakeholders, a LGBTQ plus affirming zones of practice. And this has very much been inspired by Andrew Ibraham's anti-racism model and Kerry Murphy's neurodiversity affirming zones of practice. And we have been fortunate enough to have Kerry's input in advising us on this as well. And so what we have developed is a zones of practice for LGBTQ plus themes, again, bringing in that intersectionality piece. And this will complement and be able to be used by individuals and teams and services when they are looking at the guidance, when they are using those audit tools, in the same way as we can use the anti-racism model and the neurodiversity affirming zones practice to think about where are we at individually, where are we at as a team, as a service in terms of providing LGBTQ plus affirming spaces. So we're really excited about this and pleased to say that that's being launched as of today. And whilst we're here representing that piece of work and have had the privilege to help co-lead on that, we need to acknowledge there have been many people that have been involved in this, including allies, including external stakeholders who do not work in the speech and language therapy profession. And we just want to publicly acknowledge that and say with huge heartfelt thanks to those people for their time. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Kate. So why are we collaborating with RCSLT in this working group, and why do we think it's important to continue this equality, diversity and inclusion work? Well, it really speaks to the reason that we formed our network in the first place. We want to continue to add to and complement the ongoing work of the RCSLT's ongoing work anyway, with the 5-year plan and the active work, as mentioned by the previous groups, on anti-racism and improving access for our disabled colleagues as well. We want to increase the visibility and the voices of our intersectional speech therapy colleagues. This is for our colleagues who are still in training, our SLTs to be, the students out there, as well as for people that are already in the profession, and hopefully, as was quite shockingly mentioned by Jodie, numbers of people leaving the profession. Hopefully, if we are able to provide a visible workforce, then perhaps there will be lower rates of people leaving. We want to continue supporting our peers, do more collaboration with podcasts, with groups, with talks like this. And through the network, we've learned that unfortunately some of our students and therapists have not had the best experiences either in their placements or in the workplace. And that's why our work is important, that we continue this collaboration to hopefully make this a thing of the past. One of our network members shared with us that they didn't have, or they didn't feel that their placement educator felt able to support them when this experience happens that's on screen, and hopefully by providing some guideline documents or some training, we might be able to help prevent that happen for future students. Next slide, please. The impact of our work so far, as you've seen, we've already attended 2 Pride marches, which is a huge achievement for a body such as the RCSLT to make a statement and publicly attend these marches. We believe that everyone deserves a voice, and that is something which is very important for our patients, our service users, our clients, but for us as therapists as well. We need to bring our whole selves to work. If we're not able to do that and bring our identities, then we're not giving our whole selves to our jobs and to the people that we work with. So we have already had some exciting developments in universities, including the University of Strathclyde, who have introduced working with LGBTQIA+ clients as part of their core curriculum. They're discussing that and working with the students in addressing these topics and workshopping that before it happens in the workplace for the first time. As part of our ongoing work, we will have a questionnaire for students so that we can engage with them and target our work to best support them. We've opened channels of communication and publication with the RCSLT and with Bulletin. As you can see, we have a What Does Pride Mean article on the website, which a few of us collaborated on. We have had multiple publications in Bulletin, which we are very, very proud of, displaying some of our committee members, some of our network members, and explaining some of our routes into the profession, and also explaining that we cannot just hide this part of ourselves. It comes with us to the job. And we have our online community for members, as I've mentioned before, which we've had some lovely feedback from our members that it really helps people commit to the work and bring their whole selves. Next slide, please.
So just to sort of conclude our hopes for the future, I think going back to a comment that Jess and I made at the beginning, you know, we are two white cisgendered LGBTQ+ people who do have our own intersections to that. And so we speak as those individuals and on behalf of a collective group of people, but those people have different experiences to us. And so we think about the short term that we want to be part of increasing awareness and insight into this needing to be on everybody's agenda. And we feel really passionately because, like we say, the 10 people in our committee are extremely intersectional in themselves. We have people of colour, we have disabled people, we have neurodivergent people, we are all LGBTQ+. And several people have multiple intersections to their identity. So we feel really passionate that intersectionality affirming LGBTQ+ work is really important. And that starts with the usualizing of intersectionality and identity markers in the workplace, in conversations, within the services that we provide to children, young people and adults. And that is very distinct to normalizing, because we're not gatekeeping, we're not enforcing ableism, we're usualizing that people are different and that's okay. Similar to the points that the other groups have made. And then longer term, we want to move towards actualizing that intersectional affirming practice and seeing things like our audit tools being used really meaningfully, creating actual change, so that in the same way that we can refer to neurodiversity light work that and tokenism in relation to other EDI work, we don't want that. We want to really make it meaningful and create systemic changes that are affirming for LGBTQ+ people. So there are hopes for the future with all of the various different projects that the network is involved with alongside working with RCSLT. So thank you very much for listening to us today.
Thank you very much for 3 really inspiring and powerful presentations. We've all said it, but EDI is everybody's responsibility. So we hope that everyone who's been engaging in these sessions today reflects on what they've heard and share those in their own teams and share that learning with their own teams. So now we've got about 1 hour and 20 minutes for lunch. We'll be running some drop-in sessions throughout the lunch period. So please feel free to pop in and ask any questions you may have to your colleagues, and also visit the poster area as well, and also say hi to the exhibitors and the sponsor stands. Have a good lunch. And again, thank you so much for a really great presentation just now. Thank you.